Hello, everyone, and welcome to another author interview here on Tales from the Wandering Scribe. I'm your host, Gabriel Garcia, otherwise known as the Wandering Quill and the Wandering Scribe. And today we have a first timer here on the channel, all the way from New York. Now, my guest today is an aspiring indie author who grew up in Brooklyn, New York, and now lives in the DMV. She works full time as an occupational therapy practitioner and also holds a degree in psychology. She writes steamy psychological suspense novels in her free time, and her stories are inspired by her own personal experiences or other true stories. She aims to bring attention to mental health issues, especially within the Black community, and to offer stories that resonate with the experiences of Black women and men. Her work is driven by a desire to increase representation for marginalized voices and to explore important topics like healing and setting boundaries, all while delivering an engaging and thought provoking read. And to tell us all about that and more, let's give a huge round of applause to today's guest, indie author Amari Kai. Amari, thank you so much for coming on the show today.
Thank you for having me.
No problem. So before we dive into some of the works that you have been writing, is there anything else you would like to add about your background?
Just I was actually born in the Caribbean, in St. Lucia, and was raised in
Ooh.
New York from the time I was a baby. But now I live in the DMV, and writing, working, writing.
Ain't that the truth for a lot of us indie authors? Pretty
Yeah.
much that's our two things. We write and we work. And you know what? It's very, very true. So let's actually talk about a little bit of your writing. So, how did that come about? Were you always writing growing up, or did that somehow come about later in life?
So kind of both. I started off writing. I used to like to write a lot, and I remember being in like fifth grade, and I would write little stories, and then my classmates would like pass the notebook around the classroom, and then I'd get it back and then write the next chunk of it. And that was always entertaining. And then I would write like here and there as I got older, but then I stopped for a while.
Hmm.
And then about 3 years ago or so, I decided to start writing again, really just as a therapeutic measure for myself.
Right.
And just decided, these might make some good stories. And so fictionalized like some little portions of, whatever happened, fictionalized it and started to turn it
Of
into
course.
stories.
All right. And so when you began writing these stories and writing more, what was sort of the aha moment when you realized, hmm, I wonder if other people have similar experiences or may resonate with the experiences that I'm presenting in these stories?
So it's actually one of my friends, there was one particular story, one particular situation, and a friend of mine was like kind of close to the situation as
Hmm.
well. And she was like, this is like watching a movie. And I said, it is, it really is. And then I just started writing about it because of all of the things, all of the components in it. And then I said, I wonder if there's any books out there like this. Like, this is just crazy, but not just the story itself, just from like a deep psychological perspective. I'm
Right.
like, this is like, and then that's when, I said, maybe I should write it and put it out there one day. And that's how that whole thing started.
All right. So now let's actually dive into the types of stories that you write. So in your bio, you write steamy psychological suspense novels. Now, in your opinion, what does that all entail?
So the steamy, of course, is, our little spicy scenes,
Hmm.
um, but not quite erotica.
Right.
they're in there because it's just kind of part of the story. But the psychological suspense part of it just really delves into the characters, the psyche behind the person, like peeling back those layers, understanding what the character is feeling, why they're driven. So my stories are very character driven, but then it talks about what drives them, and then those underlying components that really play a major role in our relationships, whether it's familial or platonic or romantic. Those other aspects of the person's personality that really impact all of the other people around them.
Right, of course, of course. Now, let's actually jump forward ahead in time a bit. So, when you began writing the first story that you really were invested in, what were the goals you had in mind with that story? And also, what was sort of the need you wanted to satisfy for your prospective readers?
My goal was really to start to shed light and to hopefully give people a story or just something to look at that maybe might um, get the light bulb off for
Mhm.
themselves. Sometimes, we go through things and then it's a repeated pattern, and then you don't really realize that it's a pattern of
Right.
negative behavior. Find yourself in it. And especially as, just a person of color, we don't really look at mental health. We don't really take it serious. That's not something we take care of, and we should. But just even seeing a story or seeing behavior patterns that might stick out to a person and realize that it's toxic. And maybe I need to set boundaries, or it's something that I need to, pull myself away from.
Mm,
And
mm.
that's really what started that, why I wrote that, because it's like some of this stuff can be dangerous. Um, some of this stuff can be harmful, mentally, physically. And I wanted to point some of those things out. And what was the second part of your question? I forgot. I have ADHD, my bad.
No problem. The second part was, what was sort of the need you wanted to satisfy for your prospective readers?
The needs. So, what I really wanted to do was to write stories or just provide perspectives that would allow people to feel heard and understood, things that people could relate to. And then just also, it's different in mainstream publishing and just literature. It's not really our voices, and nobody can tell our stories and our experiences the way that we do.
Mhm.
And so a lot of the stories that are out there, yeah, there's plenty that I love, with components in it that do speak to me, but it's just different when it doesn't come from someone who's actually from your community, who's has similar experiences or
Right.
similar insights.
That
And so
makes sense.
that's really what my focus was.
All right. That's actually a very, very noble cause, and I commend you for that, Amari. Now, you're welcome. Now, going forward with that first story, of course, editing and getting it to the right stage that you wanted. What was sort of the feedback like from friends and family who you told this story about? What was their reaction? Was it positive? Was it negative? Or was it sort of like in the middle?
So I got a lot of positive feedback, which was great for me because, of course, as the person who's writing it, I'm like, okay, I think it might be good, but then, of course, I'm thinking in my head, it's not good enough. So getting the positive feedback was great. And I actually sent a couple of sample chapters to somebody who doesn't know me, like, well, just got to know me, because I
Right.
wanted some feedback from somebody who isn't like doesn't have a bias, and that feedback was very positive. So that was great to know that at least I'm kind of on the right track, because exactly what they said is exactly what I wanted people to get out of the story, because they said that they felt like they were in the story, that they were the
Mm,
character, and that they wanted to see more and read more, which was the whole plan.
Nice. And would you say that those reactions, in a way, validated your goal that you set out with this story?
Yes. Yes, because it's different to read about, psychological experiences or different personality disorders or mental health issues. But then it's different when you're either the person experiencing it or you're on the receiving end of some type of psychological issue from another person. So
Mm,
I really wanted to encapsulate that and have people really feel what was going on, feel those emotions. So
nice. And that actually kind of leads perfectly into the first reflective question, which I'm very eager to hear your thoughts on, Amari. And I'll give you a little context for this. So I'm sure you can definitely agree being an author is not a get rich quick scheme. I've had a lot of people, say that when people tell them they're an author, like, oh, it's a very easy job. It's not. It's not an easy job. It's literally work. You have to set time for so many hours, whether it's a few hours in the day or you write the whole day, and it's revision, rewrites, trying to find a cover artist, trying to find an editor, and then finding a place going to format your book in a certain style, and all of that. That all takes time, and it is, as I said, work. It is not easy. But once we do have the book exactly the way we want it, we now reach another critical stage, which is like that sense of anxiety where are people going to enjoy it? Are people going to feel the same emotions that I had when I was writing this story? Because I feel that every author goes through that, whether you're an indie author or a newly published author with a publishing house, that anxiety builds up because now in the digital age, everyone can see it, everybody can read in some manner of speaking, and just that voice in the back of everyone's head, that imposter syndrome voice talking
yeah.
to us saying, no one's going to read this, no one's going to like this, you're copying someone else, who's going to read this type of story? And it really hampers us and it really makes us consider and doubt ourselves that we are truly authors. So I turn over to you, Amari. During your initial stages as an indie author, did you ever have those imposter syndrome thoughts or feelings of anxiety? And if so, what has continued to discipline you to tell these stories, to give voices to the marginalized community, and bring about topics that don't really get a lot of recognition or discussion?
Yes, I still suffer from the imposter syndrome. And it's scary, but when I get feedback, especially from people who don't know me, who aren't biased, and they're like, "Oh wow, this is great," or that it resonates with them, it's like, okay, I'm not the only person. So there's that part of it, and then I just tell myself that the stories deserve a voice. They
Mm-hmm.
deserve to be heard, and that they're just as valuable as other mainstream stories out there. Um, I know I can't be the only person in the world who finds that, yeah, there's a lot of books that I like and, across different genres, but there's still something missing. So there's that part of it too, that's also trying to reach the other people like me who desire a
Right.
certain book like me that we can't find or it's hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it is difficult, especially if you try to go the traditional publishing route, because then it's rejection after rejection after rejection.
Right.
But that's the good thing about being an indie author, because then you get to take control of your voice and what you put out there. But it's a lot of hard work because you still got to make sure that what you're putting out is quality work.
Yes, 100%. And that actually ties in perfectly to the next segment of this interview, which is what I like to call the business corner, the business side of being an author. Now, before we begin, Mari, I just want to ask you, so are your stories currently published and out for people to buy, or are they still in the writing stages?
So they're not published yet. I have a complete one. It's at the final stages of editing, and I should be getting that back within like another couple of weeks. So at least like that's done, like all of the rounds of revision and all that stuff. So it's final rounds, and then it'll be, you know, all of the other things that come with it, like the book covers and all of that stuff. And I have a completed novelette that's also in editing right now that I'll be releasing. My goal is for the end of next month, but
Hmm.
we'll just see how it goes, and that'll be just like a teaser for everybody to kind of get a taste of my work. But so yeah, so hopefully by the end of next month that should be out.
Okay. And as a little teaser for our viewers and listeners, what can you tell us about your almost completed novel? In just, you don't have to be so specific because I know you want to keep some of the very juicy bits until the end, but as a broad little overview, what does the story entail?
So the novel itself is called Fractured Mind. And of course, it's a steamy psychological suspense novel. The main character is Georgia Santos, and she's just a woman on the edge. So the book opens up with her being unemployed, and her husband are, you know, on the verge of a possible eviction, and they have young twin daughters. So, of course, that kind of, for anybody, you be anxious. But Georgia, she actually does find a job pretty soon, and you know she kind of thinks that things are like balancing out, but it doesn't happen soon enough for her. And because of that, of course, mentally she's just kind of starting to deteriorate because she's just worried about being able to secure a good future for her kids.
Mm.
Um, she finds like this coworker at her new job that she just feels comfortable with, and that limerence starts to grow into just like a crazy obsession, which you know is for her is an outlet and an escape from everything that she has going on. But that obsession grows deeper and deeper, and then just like fuels just a whole spiral of bad choices that we start to see her life unravel, just bad choice after bad choice, until it comes to a head, and then she has to make a decision of what she's going to do with herself.
Yes, this does sound like a movie, and actually, it feels like a movie that has been like presented like on Netflix because oh my gosh, that already gets like I already have like a trailer in my mind of how the story is, and honestly, that's credit to you, Amari, as an author because you in just that short time you created a world that I was able to envision. And honestly, I am very eager to see how this story plays out. And I'm sure a lot of people watching and listening to this are also very eager as well. So definitely keep us posted on the progress of that story.
Will do. And I'm excited about the novelette as well. That's in the works because that's going to be coming out really soon, and that's, you know, steamy as well. And I think that will also resonate with a lot of people with, you know, a lot. I think a lot of people, male and female, have may have been in situations or know people who have been in situations where they're in like a toxic type of relationship that they can't
Right.
really can get rid of.
Hmm.
And it's just not good for them. It's just all the bad things. And then when they finally realize, like, oh my goodness, I need to get out of here. It's like, now pedal to the metal, trying to break loose of like a toxic relationship.
Right, definitely. And speaking of what you mentioned before about being an indie author has given you this outlet to tell these stories and have the creative freedom to tell them fully and honestly, where did that decision come about? Was that always the plan from the get-go when you began writing, or did you initially want to try your hand at traditional publishing?
The plan was to go traditional, and that quickly just kind of dissipated because querying and all of that stuff
Mm-hmm.
with rejection sensitivity and, imposter syndrome just doesn't mix well. And a friend of mine actually encouraged me to go the indie publishing route
Right.
instead. And so I said, okay. And, was hesitating at first, but the idea started to grow on me. And then as I started to write like my other book, um, I liked it a lot better because I was less stressed.
Right.
Because that meant I didn't have to write query letters. I didn't have to go hunting down, agents and stuff. And then I didn't have to face like 100 rejections, wondering if it was me or so. That's how I came to that decision, and I'm gonna stick with it.
All right. And the follow-up question is because I'm really eager to hear your thoughts on it. So, in your bio, you said that your stories are inspired by your own personal experiences and other true stories. So, as an author, how do you sort of find the balance between the two where you are still authentic to the true events, but depending on what those true events were, you're still being fictional, and maybe depending on the situation, maybe less or more in certain situations?
So what I do is I might take the central theme of whatever it is that happened and then build my entire story and entire world around that central theme.
Okay.
Like for Fractured Mind, for example, the central theme is really around a person who is obsessed with a coworker
Hmm.
and how that kind of plays into the dynamics of a person who is clearly mentally unstable but functional, and how that desire, how that kind of plays into the obsession, and then, just build my entire world, build the entire story around that theme.
Okay. And then, are there any central themes that you will not do stories on?
Um, for me, it's just it has to be close enough to me for me to be able to
Mm,
really delve into it
okay.
and peel it, reveal all of the layers. Because if it's too foreign for me, I don't think that I would write it the right way.
Okay.
So if it's something that I'm familiar with or, can really connect to, then yes. If it's not, then no, I'm not going to touch it.
Okay, that makes sense. That makes sense. So now let's actually talk about the audience. And I'm actually very intrigued to hear your thoughts on this question. And the reason I bring up the audience is that for us authors, we are the target audience of our own stories. But when we share it with others, we are always trying to think, okay, who exactly is this marketed towards? Who is this geared towards? Fans of the psychological suspense, fans of psychological steamy, and so forth, whatever. We're always thinking of the audience. Now, Amari, this is a two-part question. The first part is, in your opinion, how important is it for an author to really consider the audience for their story? And the second part is, when writing both your novel and novelette, did you get an idea of who your audience was going to be?
So yes, I think it is important because that's going to help drive your story in certain ways because you know what your audience is looking for. So like for me, okay, I know that I'm writing for adults, like obviously.
Right.
So there are certain things that I could talk about in a book that I'm writing for adults versus, teens or, children. So there's that
Right.
part. Um, and also, if I'm saying steamy, then I know there's certain elements that I have to put in there.
Hmm.
And if I know that I'm looking for people who enjoy that type of read, then I know that the people who are like no or only like a one spice level or one heat level,
Right.
that they're likely not going to like my book. So I know I can't really target them as my audience because it might be too much for them, which is okay. Everybody doesn't like everything, so that's
Right.
completely fine. But it gives you a better idea of how to really get in front of your audience, like where to look for them and the elements that you should be putting out there so that way people know, oh, this is for me or it's not for me.
Right. And I think you may have already mentioned this. So, in terms of like readership, your readership is more towards young, not young adult, that'd be wrong audience, but new adult and adult fiction, where, as you mentioned, these themes are going to be very adult. They're going to be touching on things that, you know, adults, new adults are experiencing, and you're not going to shy away from these themes that will probably make people uncomfortable.
Right. And I wouldn't even say it's for new adults, honestly. I think, more 25 and up is probably,
Oh, so like straight up adult fiction.
yes, yes, it's adult fiction. I wouldn't say new adults. It might be a bit too much for them. I mean, some people might like it, but it's definitely adult. And yeah, I think some of the things might be uncomfortable. I aim for it to be, funny. There's portions of my personality in all of the stories that I write. So some things might be funny, some things might be witty, some things are a bit more serious. All of them are going to have some steam, but definitely adult.
All right. Now you mentioned your personality in your writings, which is actually perfect because that leads into the next question, which it's going to be a little bit different. So initially, this question would always be like, who are the authors that inspired you, who helped you find your voice as an author? But I am changing it to a slightly different question, which is this. I'll give a little context for this one. So I'm sure you've seen books that have had this tagline, the next so and so. And for a reader who sees that, it's like, oh, okay, I know what to expect. Even if you've never read that author that's being compared to this new author, you at least have an understanding, an idea. But for that author's perspective, it's not really helpful or beneficial
Mm.
because they don't write in that style that author they're being compared to. Their characters are not the same. Their world building is not the same. Their prose is very, very different. And it may damage that author's individuality. As one of my guests said in a previous interview a few months ago, we're all trying to show our personality. We're all
Mhm.
trying to show our individuality because when we present our books to the public, we want our readers to pick up a book and to see this is so and so's voice. I know what I'm getting into. So that way, when they read another work by us, they automatically know what to expect. So for you, Amari, how do you sort of like balance, your personality in your writing to show this is who I am, this is what I'm trying to share with you all, and this is what you can expect from me in my other works?
So there's at least so far in the books that I've written, at least one of the characters. None of the main characters are me,
Mm-hmm.
but a, a character in there will represent me. Like whether it's my take on something, a portion of my personality or
Right.
something. So there's me in there that's represented by a character.
Right.
So there'll be, some characters that are a bit more like punchy and just like, straight to it. And then there's other characters that are a bit more empathetic. Um,
Mm.
so that's how I kind of like carve myself in there. Because again, these stories are based on things that either I experienced or am close to, or I read about or heard about. And so I'll have my take in there. And that's kind of how I weave myself in
Mm.
there. And then I think the people who know me will be able to pick up on that fast. But I think as people get to know me and my new readers, they'll start to see that as they read more of my work.
Definitely. And now we arrive at probably the most important question of the business portion. And it's a big one. So I'm going to lay some context for this one. And here it is. So, for all authors, we all want to share our work and get our voices out there. And we all have these goals that we all want to achieve. And, you know, interviewing authors for now almost 2 years back. I started doing this in 2022, and after interviewing a lot of different authors who write vastly different types of stories, I've come to learn a very important lesson that for us authors, there's something that's called the two paths. That is to be an author and to be known as an author, which are two very different things with their own goals and trials and tribulations. To be an author is an individual dedicated to the art of storytelling, where capital is not really the main motivator, but it's nice to get. To be known as an author is an individual dedicated to the art of marketing, promoting their books on every social media platform, getting on shows such as these, being interviewed, and doing everything in their power to show the world this is my book. And none of these paths are wrong. You know, each of us can choose our own, but the long term goals have to be realistic. And I definitely feel the biggest issue for first time authors is the belief that, you know, our debut work is going to be the start of our legacy. That is not true
Hmm.
necessarily. There are authors, yes, whose first work skyrocket them to award winning status. And that is a huge accomplishment. That is not an easy feat to do. So, all the credit to them. But on the other side of the coin, generally speaking, a majority of indie authors who try to make their debut novel, the novel that gets their name out there, it doesn't really work. And ultimately, what you have are authors who are not really passionate about writing. They're just trying to join the trends because that's what's happening right now. And ultimately, you'll lose your passion for writing. So, Amari, I turn it over to you to add your thoughts on this discussion. Where, yes, you know, all of us authors, we want to get our name out there, but we have to understand that just because we wrote our debut novel, which probably took us a long time and we put a lot of passion and heart into it, it doesn't guarantee the start of our legacy as an author, but it should not deter us from writing more stories if we're truly passionate about the craft.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's like, I don't even know if it's one in a million, but it's very rare for, your debut work to be the thing that just kind of catapults you to the next level. That it just doesn't happen that often. So, um, I think those who know and understand that and just they really want to write because they care, like that's their passion, that's different. But of course, like you said, we would all like to be recognized. We all hope that our will put a book out. Then who knows what the book is, which number book, that'll make us recognized.
Right.
But I think for I know at least for me, it's just the storytelling. Like I've been through a lot, like a lot of other people have been through a lot.
Mm-hmm.
and have survived and came out on the other side. And, there's other people who want stories that are similar to theirs. And that's more so of why I do it, whether it happens now or it happens 100 years from now when people stumble across a book and they're like, "Oh, this is great." Um, I'm doing it more so for that, for those
Hmm.
voices to to tell those stories that are marginalized. And I'm not great at marketing myself.
Hmm. It's not easy. That's probably one of the biggest things for us indie authors is marketing our own books. It's not an easy feat. I am still working on marketing, and it's a trial and error process. We find out what works, we find out what doesn't work, and we just go from there. And also to add to that, one of my other guests said a very important thing, which I finally remembered, which is grit transforms into talent for us authors, which is very, very true. And for those who are watching this for the first time, don't know what that means. If you are truly passionate about writing and really want to show the world who you are, it's perseverance, it's grit, it's showcasing your work because we only get better as authors. I mean, some of the titans that we admire in the publishing world, they've grown as authors. They had to develop their own writing style. They had to figure out what stories they were interested in telling. They had to figure out who they were as individuals and as authors. And then when they finally reached that moment and they finally wrote that story that really got people's attention, they were like, hey, if you enjoyed this story, check out my others so you can see how I've grown as an author. And ultimately, as I said, grit transforms into talent. And we learn so much from ourselves as well as from others too, especially the indie author community. And speaking of the indie author community, Amari, I was wondering if you could tell us a little about your interactions and your experience with the indie author community. Are there any authors you would like to give a shout out to who have helped you understand the business and industry a little bit better?
So I'm actually just like new starting to get my social media out there. I created my page like a couple of years ago though. And then just like I had a few posts and then I just stopped posting.
Okay.
So more recently that I've started to like really get out there. So I haven't had a chance to really interact with a lot of people yet, but a friend of mine is a brand strategist and
Okay.
worked in publishing because for a moment he had his own publishing company. And so he was starting to tell me about like a lot of these things. And he's the one who was pushing me to go the indie author route
Right.
instead. So my friend has been like a huge help. It's just a lot. But you're right, because my first my very first novel that I finished, I mean, I finished it fast. It was horrible. It was all over the place. But the more you grow and learn, and we do learn from each other and stuff, then the better you get. So I'm also hoping to really start to build my community with other indie authors so we can support each other. Because it's a hard road out there, especially as an indie author.
Yes, it is absolutely. And you touch on a very important thing. Us indie authors, we have to stick together. We always learn from, other people, and especially on Instagram. I am surprised by the number of indie authors on that platform alone. It is ridiculous. It is insane. And I've said this numerous times, and I don't mind saying it, but a majority of the authors who I featured this or say these past few months have all been from Instagram, and hearing their stories and learning from them. It's really interesting to find out, what got them started on this path. Why do they write these kind of stories? What are their goals and hopes with these stories? And so forth. And just learning what they hope to achieve down the road and inspiring the next generation of writers and authors, which now leads us to the final question, which is very much the same thing that I just mentioned just now, which is this. So, Amari, with everything you're learning and still learning about the indie author community and the industry, what is your word of wisdom to future authors and writers watching this interview right now?
I would say to stay true to the stories that you want to tell, even if it doesn't fit into that neat box or, with mainstream expectations. Write with authenticity and don't be afraid to dive into the messy, complicated parts of life that other people might shy away from. I think the biggest thing is to understand that your unique voice and perspective are your greatest aspects. So you have to just trust that about you and your craft.
Absolutely 100% agreed. And we've now reached the end of this amazing author interview. Now, before we end, viewers and listeners, I want to give a huge thank you to Amari for coming on the show and giving us a teaser into her novel and novelette and future work she has planned down the road. Now, Amari, where can people find and engage with you on social media to stay up to date with your novel and with your other writings?
I'm on Instagram at author underscore Amari Kai. And that's mainly where I am right now. So looking forward to see all of you over there and keep writing and keep reading.
Yes, definitely. I will link that down below in the description of this video. Thank you all so very much for joining us for another author interview here on the channel for the month of September. And also make sure to go out and buy a copy of Michael the Last Angel of Earth, which is available on barnesandnoble.com in paperback and ebook. I will link it down below in the description of this video. And again, thank you also very much for joining us for another author interview here on the channel. And a huge thank you to Amari Kai for coming on the show. We wish her the very best going forward, and we can't wait to see her novel and novelette out for the public to see. And as always, viewers and listeners, make sure to like and subscribe and comment down below. What was your favorite part of the interview? And as always, this is the Wandering Scribe and the Wandering Quill signing out, wishing you all a wonderful day.